I think Inc. has a strong storytelling tradition and a real sense of purpose and mission, and those were things that I was excited to see were still there and very consistent and something to build on and continue to build on.
Inc. 5000 event, what that event was.
When I think about what Inc. is, it's really to inform, educate, convene founders and entrepreneurs, and this is like at the heart of sort of the informing and the convening part of it, right? Where we bring people together, they get access to speakers who can give them advice on how to grow their business and take it to the next level. Inc. has always been blessed by a really well-defined audience of like founders and CEOs of privately held companies. When we think about what we compete with, I always think about like our competitive landscape includes, every Substack, right? And every founder podcast, which didn't exist when I first started at Inc., as well as like every founder's group chat, like they're all in group chats with their portfolio companies from their VCs and get great information there.
Events, subscriptions, advertisers, what's growing, what you're really focused on and what you're excited about in terms of the business?
I would say for sure.
So where I would like to begin is with an event that happened recently in the Inc. universe, and that is your Inc. 5000 event. And we were talking about, how that's sort of emblematic of the way that you all think about the content that you create, the revenue streams that you drive, and also that being kind of the marquee franchise of Inc. So I would love it if you could give the audience a little bit of texture around what that event was, how it kind of works for you, throughout the year, and also how it works for you as a revenue driver in and of itself.
Sure. Well, first of all, hi everybody, and thanks for being here. It's trippy for me to see Jason Del Rey, a former Inc. colleague, in the front row. He told me on the way in that I was in the hot seat now, so hopefully I'll have good answers being in the hot seat. But the Inc. 5000 is great. It's sort of the marquee part of the Inc. brand. It's a ranking of the fastest growing 5,000 privately held companies in America. And the event is sort of a summit where we bring them together. This year it was in Phoenix. And, they get an opportunity to network. Being an entrepreneur can be very lonely. So it's an opportunity for them to sort of meet people across industries who are not direct competitors and learn from one another. We have 3 days of programming. Some of it is ticketed. All of it is invite only. It culminates with a gala where people get awards and get very excited and wear like tuxedos and fun outfits. And it's a really exciting part of the Inc. brand. It is also a big driver of our business. I mean, all in, it's a significant chunk of Inc.'s total revenue, both the list and the event itself. This year it was record-breaking in terms of attendance revenue, which was really exciting. It was near record for sponsor revenue. We had 12 sponsors, so it was a great driver of the business. And it sort of feels to us like, when I think about Inc., and I started my career at Inc., when I think about what Inc. is, it's really to inform, educate, convene founders and entrepreneurs, and this is like at the heart of sort of the informing and the convening part of it, right? Where we bring people together, they get access to speakers who can give them advice on how to grow their business and take it to the next level. We had something like 3 billionaires on the program, which people were excited about. And then beyond that, it's a chance for them to come together, which is important.
To what do you attribute some of that record-breaking revenue in terms of attendance, and it sounds like near record-breaking in terms of sponsorships? Do you feel like you all have been executing in a way where it's really resonating? Do you feel like the culture has come to Inc.? I would love to just hear about some of the why there.
So I actually am missing a post-mortem briefing call to be here today, so they'll be working on that there. But I think it's interesting, and to be honest, we went into this year being a little nervous, right? It's sort of unclear what's going on with the economy, unclear if people would want to send them themselves go or send their teams to a big event in Phoenix, but they did. I think some of it is that, the Inc. 5000 is a self-selecting audience of people who are growing fast. So in a world where not everybody is growing, they are successful, and they're sort of maybe happy to sort of, manifest that success by having, sort of a big party and being at an event like that. I think some of it is good coordination among our teams. We have a new Chief Revenue Officer, CC Ryan, who along with Jen Henkes, our Head of Revenue, I think did a great job of bringing in sponsors. Inc. is interesting as a brand. We've had very long relationships with our event sponsors. The Inc. 5000 goes back to the 80s. the event, which was previously the Inc. 500. Principal, who's one of our sponsors, has been coming back for 23 years, right? So like having that sort of repeat business. Capital One Business is another sponsor who's been coming back, I think, for 7 or 8 years now. So we start with a nice base. And then like when you factor in economic uncertainty in the ad market, it's like, that's always the margin of like, do we have an okay year or a good year or a great year? And this year we had clients come in, including, clients who came in kind of late. So we sort of saw, what used to happen in advertising where you would get that like rush of advertising in Q4. We saw a little bit of that in Q3 in sponsorship revenue.
That's great. We've danced around this a little bit, but I would love to just hear from you kind of what the Inc. audience is and what you're trying to be to that audience. Because it feels like there are a lot of publications that are, talking to founders and talking about startups and that sort of thing. But you all have a pretty unique, I think, differentiated lane there. And I would just love to get you to articulate that.
Yeah, so I mentioned I started my career at Inc. I started as a fact checker and spent my first 15 years there. And one of the things I would say is that Inc. has always been blessed by a really well-defined audience of like founders and CEOs of privately held companies. When I was at Inc. the first time, we sort of had that lane completely to ourselves in that, founders were not necessarily a group that other publications wrote about a lot. It wasn't as part of the culture. People didn't sort of think about the IPO market as like a thing that they followed, almost like a hobby in the way that like people are very conversant in that now. The average person's very conversant. So, fast forward to now, when I came back to Inc. 2 years ago, one of the things that's really struck me is that the competitive landscape around us has changed. And of course, we are identified with founders, but like many business publications, as we have been scaling our business and scaling things on digital, we probably, moved away from some of that precise orientation to do the types of stories that are more broad. And that's something that we've been working to adjust and course correct on. And then at the same time, I would say the world around us became very aware of founders, and probably every business publication in this room really covers startups well. There are certainly people who have very specific lanes of founders and founder type coverage that they cover across the business journalism and even the consumer journalism landscape. And also when we think about who we compete with, or not, I shouldn't say who, but what we compete with, I always think about our competitive landscape includes, every Substack, right, and every founder podcast, which didn't exist when I first started at Inc., as well as every founder's group chat. They're all in group chats with their portfolio companies from their VCs and get great information there, and that makes it more incumbent upon us to really raise the bar editorially so that we compete with those sources.
Yeah. Going back to the revenue mix a little bit. So events, subscriptions, advertisers, across events and print and digital and probably podcasts as well. Could you give us a sense of, that mix and what's growing, what you're really focused on and what you're excited about in terms of the business?
Sure. I would say for sure, digital direct and events are the driver of total revenue, and the Inc. 5000 being the biggest driver of that. We also have a very healthy and sort of longstanding recognition program business or a list business, and that's a big driver of revenue as well. And then there are new areas that are kind of bigger growth areas, and that's really exciting to me, around community and membership. We have a membership group called the Inc. Leadership Forum, which has several hundred members now. Many of them were together at the Inc. 5000, which was fun to see. That was sort of like their annual meeting. We have other community initiatives like that, which are drivers of a small amount of revenue today, but we see real growth there and real opportunity. And I think that we sort of feel like what we can do to strengthen our business and to stabilize it in a world where we all know the ad market is sort of up and down and complicated, is really sort of build that consumer direct revenue, and we've had early success in doing that.
When did that start, that sort of membership business?
The membership business is, we sort of relaunched it under a new name about a year ago. It's a couple of years old. Fast Company, which is our sister brand, has Fast Company Impact Council, which Stephanie Meth, our CEO, inaugurated when she started at Fast Company. And both of those businesses have been gaining traction year over year. We talk about competitors like Chief and Hampton are also in ways competitors to business media. And we think about what offerings do we have that line up with them that are still journalistic, right? And great journalism is at the core of what we do, and we want to make sure that we build these membership programs and community programs in a way where that becomes kind of another channel for the storytelling that we do.
Yeah. So you alluded to the fact that you started your career at Inc. as a fact checker, spent 14 years there, took a bit of an interlude, bit of a break, went to Conde and GQ and some other places, and then came back and you became editor-in-chief last year, 2024. What?
18 months, but yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did you see when you entered that seat that was familiar to you? What was maybe less familiar? What did you want to change? What did you really want to maintain? What were your priorities?
I think Inc. has a strong storytelling tradition and a real sense of purpose and mission, and those were things that I was excited to see were still there and very consistent and something to build on and continue to build on. And then in terms of, just thinking about modernizing the brand, right? Those things like community and membership were really exciting to me. Thinking about the world of entrepreneurship more holistically. So everything from, as I mentioned, the world of entrepreneurship around us has changed, and there's so many aspirants now and so many people with side hustles and passive income, and that's a part of the Inc. audience that we probably didn't speak to 5 or 10 years ago, but it's a really interesting part of the audience that feels very familiar and adjacent to where we've been in terms of our sort of addressable audience. Beyond that, there's so many things around the way we think about social video and the way we, have a variety of events, not just big events. Those are areas where, there were real opportunities for us to try new things. I often say this, when I started Inc., we could write about a company and the employees could love the CEO or the employees could not like the CEO or whatever. But, everyone sort of agreed that capitalism was the right system to operate in. And it struck me very much when I came back to Inc. that there's a debate about that, right? And that infuses a lot of the workplace strife that we see, whether it's covering return to office or covering pay equity or pay disparity. And that's sort of a new, rich vein that we've begun to tap into. We had sort of an interesting session at the Inc. 5000 where we had Jeff Flake, who was the senator from Arizona, and Doug Emhoff, who was a former second gentleman, sort of talking about the future of American capitalism and American competitiveness. And that kind of storytelling and those kinds of themes feel new and fresh and interesting to me. And it's tricky, right? Because our audience are the most creative capitalists and the most enthusiastic capitalists in a time when that is not totally where the culture is relative to the 90s or the 2000s. And so that's another area that feels kind of new.
That's really interesting. So did you get some of that feedback from the audience? Where you saw reactions on social media where basically people were just kind of questioning the economic foundation in which some of these companies, some of these founders were thriving?
Certainly you see it on the employee side in lots of places. There's lots of, everybody knows I think you see it for sure in the world of big tech, where people are both questioning, has big tech lost its way or these are the entrepreneurial heroes. And I think we also saw it in a big way, in the last year with Elon Musk, who I remember meeting at an Inc. 5000 circa the early 2000s and seemed like a nice, mild-mannered young man, and I think, the sort of perception of him as a figure in the entrepreneurial world, someone who's a hero to many of our readers for all that he's accomplished, but then also someone who, they have questions about too, is interesting. For example, on the Inc. 5000, we have tons of government contracting companies, and they have a different point of view about Doge cuts, right? Or a more complicated point of view than maybe some other, folks who are more supportive of it. And tariffs is another thing that entrepreneurs bring up a lot. And so there is sort of a question both around capitalism as it exists today, and also really sort of what are the stakes for the free market. And that's something we hear a lot, and that's, again, sort of a rich area for reporting.
Very interesting. All right, we have about a minute left. I would love to hear...
Really?
Yeah,
oh, wow.
I know. Time flies when you're having fun. We'd love to hear quick thoughts on AI and just anything that kind of keeps you up at night.
I wouldn't say AI keeps me up at night, but it could. I would say for AI, it's like an interesting thing, right? It is both an amazing story for technology journalists, and there's like so much happening, and there are new companies that are emerging all the time. I think for Inc.'s audience, right, what's really interesting is founders used to say that the way they wanted to grow and achieve success was that they would like get bigger and they'd have more offices and more people and more offices and more people. And that paradigm is definitely not there anymore. The founders are really thinking about how lean can we keep this company and how big can we get. That's another thing that gets to like, what's the future of capitalism if that's the case? Yeah, so I think that's interesting. I think for newsrooms, I think we're in a place where we're interested and curious about how to apply AI to what we do in a way that's responsible. And then I also, what keeps me up at night, right, is that like, Inc. and the Inc. 5000 database is like this great asset for our company, and like, boy, do I not want that to get like, lost into an LLM, or, for that to be like something that we lose control over. So I guess that's, my feeling about AI is that like, it's a great, exciting story opportunity, but like all of them, there are puts and takes, and I think it's great for journalists when you can have like a whole question about like, is this a bubble or is this going to change everything? And the answer is probably both. I guess one last thought I'd share is that we did a story recently on the sort of Webbies from circa 2000 at the peak of the dot-com bubble, and it was like very fun that the best in show was given to eToys and the runner-up was Amazon. And I think about that like, for us covering AI now, some of these companies are going to be eToys and some are going to be Amazon.
Awesome. Everybody, big round of applause for Mike Hofman.
Thanks
Thanks very much.